Hey, happy holidays, everyone. Tonight I'm going to do something a little bit different because I realize I've done a lot of things regarding I guess, Santa Claus faith and practice, right? I don't talk about religion too often on here, but a lot of the stuff I've done has been aimed at Christmas trees and Santa Claus and all that kind of stuff. But this is also the third night of Hanukkah, right? And being that I'm not of that faith, I'm not a Jewish person, I got thinking about, well, what is Hanukkah? What do we know about Hanukkah? What do I know about Hanukkah? Well, what I know is it's 8 crazy nights. Oh, Adam Sandler. No, it's 8 nights, right? And I know that it had to do with the fact they only had enough oil for the menorah, which is the candelabra type. And I apologize, I mean no disrespect. That's how I refer to it in my mind. But there's an 8 candle holder, and there's only enough oil for one candle to be lit. Instead, it lasted for 8 nights, right? And it's considered a miracle of that, right? So I'm gonna defer a little bit to a couple of websites, Wikipedia being the main one, just to kind of get a basic overview and just to kind of talk about what that's about. So Hanukkah, it's a Jewish festival of lights, which it's centered on the recovery of Jerusalem and its rededication to the Second Temple. Okay, so at the beginning of the Maccabean revolt against the Seleucid Empire in the 2nd century BCE. So basically, 2nd century before Christ. That's why Jewish faith doesn't refer to Christ because he's not in it, right? It's observed for 8 days and 8 nights. What I didn't know is that it starts on the 25th day of the Kislev on the Hebrew calendar, right? You must think, oh, is that December 25th? It is not. That is why Hanukkah switches days, and it's not the same day every year. So it can occur anytime between November 28th and December 27th is when it can start. Hence, this time it started on Christmas Day for us non-Jewish folks who celebrate Christmas, and it lasts until January 2nd, right? And that is, of course, with the Gregorian calendar, the one we follow, right? It's observed, as I said, it's observed by lighting the candles and the cabrolum with the 9 branches, right? It's a menorah or Hanukkah. Ooh, there you know. One branch is typically placed above the others, right? And its candle is used to light all the candles. Now, this type of unique candle is called the shamash, which means attendant. So basically, that is how you light your candles, with the attendant, right? An additional candle is lit by the shamash. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Until all 8 candles are lit together on the final night of the festival, right? So, and when it comes to Hanukkah traditions, I don't know a lot about that. And I thought maybe some of you might not either, might like to know more about it. So there's Hanukkah songs, not just all the Adam Sandler songs, but I tell you, there's one that I have in my head I can't shake, and it was the bum dee 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 bum, right? From right. I have a little dreidel, O Hanukkah, Judas Maccabeus. I don't have any of those to play for you, but I'm actually quite curious. I've heard Jewish songs before, and I've always found them quite fascinating. It's the language, the dialect. It's such a like a like you really gotta go deep to get that stuff out, right? So I mean, like the dreidel. Everyone, I don't know if everyone's seen a dreidel. It's basically it's a top, right, with pull it upside down. It's kind of like a pyramid with a long shaft, and it's got the little stick on it. You spin it around. And you do that, and there's a lot of and now it's curious with foods, oil-based foods, latkes. There's one called Sefengoyot. Hope I'm saying that correctly, but it's kind of basically it's very similar to a jelly donut, what I understand. And dairy foods. There's lots of dairy foods in the Jewish tradition. If you're lactose intolerant, you may have to convert. I'm not sure. Um, but I mean, there's been everything is about Christmas and everything is about those kind of things. There's not a lot about Hanukkah, right? The Adam Sandler Hanukkah songs are quite catchy and quite good. But Hanukkah itself comes from a Hebrew verb, which I cannot pronounce, but it means to dedicate, right? On Hanukkah, the Maccabean Jews regained control of Jerusalem and rededicated the temple. So it's really about celebrating the return to one's homeland and reclaiming it and making it for the next generations, which is, admirable. A lot of religions follow those basic same principles, even though the protagonist or antagonists are often different means, right? So it's kind of cool, man. Hanukkah is also the festival of lights, as I alluded to at the beginning, right? That's something that in modern Hebrew, at least, um, it's from and then on we celebrate this festival and we call it lights. That was from Josephus in Antiquities of the Jew. The first Hebrew translation of Antiquities was in 1864, and he used the term Festival of Lamps, but the translation Festival of Lights appeared by the end of the 19th century. Right? There's lots of historical sources that refer to it. The Book of Maccabees, early rabbinic sources. I really hope I'm not butchering the Jewish language, but I think I probably with this one. It goes all the way back to the first century. The Megillat Tanit contains a list of festive days on which fasting or euloging is forbidden. It specifies on the 25th of Kislev is Hanukkah of 8 days, right? And one is not to eulogize. And then it talks again about the story about the rededication of the temple, right? It's kind of interesting. This is very, very brief options, right? The miracle of the 1 day supply of oil lasting 8 days was described in Talmud, which is committed to writing about 600 years after the events described in the book of Maccabees. So after that was the first century or 2nd century BC. So I guess let's say about 400 AC, I guess it would be. The Talmud says that after the forces had been driven from the temple, the Maccabees discovered that all the ritual olive oil had been profaned. So they found only a single container that was still sealed by a high priest. Had enough oil in the menorah to keep it lit for a single day, yet when they used this, it burned for 8 days. The time it took to have new oil pressed and be ready. So they needed that oil for warmth, for light, all that sort of stuff. It should have lasted 1 day, but it lasted 8. Right, hence the miracle part. So the Talmud presented 3 options: that the law requires only 1 light each night per household, hence the lighting of the menorah each night. A better practice to light 1 light for each night for each member of the household. Fair enough. And the most preferred practice is to vary the number of lights each night. Right? So those are the 3 options of how to light your menorah if you're doing so. I know folks that'll do it 1 and then they'll do 2, then they'll light them as they go. So by the end of it all 8 are going to be up. In times of danger, except in times of danger, the lights were to be placed outside one's door, on the opposite of the mezuzah, or in the windows closest to the street, for sure. So I think closer as traffic through so people could see it, right? And they want to publicize the miracle of the blessings of Hanukkah lights, which is, kind of cool, man. Like when you think about it. I mentioned Josephus. He was a Jewish historian. Titus Flavius Josephus. That's a pretty cool name, I have to say. He had a book, Jewish Antiquities, which I already mentioned. How the victorious Judas Maccabeus ordered lavish yearly 8-day festivals after rededicating the temple in Jerusalem that had been profaned by Anchialus IV Euphrates. That guy just sounds like a dick. Josephus does not say when the festival was called Hanukkah, but rather the Festival of Lights. So Hanukkah kind of sounds like it might have been a more recent addition to that. But again, if Hanukkah is translated in the Festival of Lights, I'm sure it was there right from the beginning. So there's that. And even in the New Testament, if there's any fans of the New Testament, John 10:22 to 23 says, "Then came the festival of dedication at Jerusalem. It was winter, And Jesus was in the temple courts walking in Solomon's colonnade, right? So that's interesting. Jewish faith, to my understanding, doesn't have Jesus Christ as a protagonist or antagonist, depending on your point of view or what you believe in, right? But the fact that it's mentioned in there shows that it was definitely around at that time. And I find that a lot of these biblical, these things of biblical importance or significance often cross paths, and you can kind of reference them back then, even though today we might be looking at it through a different light than we see, right? So man, it's pretty interesting. But the fact that, like, okay, that's where it came from was the fact that it was the miracle they needed for it, and it lasted 8 days until more could be made, right? This is God taking care of his people. And I think that's something that, people don't necessarily realize. And there is a timeline, but I'm not going to get into all that or what those words mean. The only reason I'm doing this, I want to bring a little bit of maybe awareness. I didn't know what this was, so I thought, man, if I'm going to do this, then maybe I'll do it like this so we can kind of learn about it together. The Kislev, 25th day of Kislev, according to the Hebrew calendar. So November 28th to December 27th. That's pretty cool. Because I always wondered why it was a different day, right? And I mean, there's other religions around this time as well. But I mean, the fact that, Hanukkah itself means to dedicate. And it says it all. Because when they took back the temple, they rededicated it because the Jews were back in control of Jerusalem. Now, I'm not going to comment on anything going on there now, because it's not my place. And regardless of where you are in that fence or in that viewpoint or in that battle, you can agree that's the cradle of civilization, man. And all these stories, all these religious aspects seem to go to that aspect. Now, I don't know if that's just because we're in North America and those are two of the strongest religions we have. It could very well be, because I know Muslims, faith and different faiths have different viewpoints of what that should be. And I'm not getting into any of that stuff. But it's interesting that that really was the cradle of civilization. Now, if everything sprang from there, then you have to think that we're all connected on some ancient level. And now we're just kind of like great-great-grandkids fighting over what was left, right? But it's interesting when you consider how much blood's been spilled. The Jewish faith as a people have not had an easy go of it through history. I think that goes without saying. Even less than 100 years ago, they were being hunted and persecuted, right? So that's why I find this stuff interesting. It's one of the largest religions in the world, but yet after 1945, there was not a lot of practicing Jews left. And the ones that were subjugated to horrors. So the fact that this is being kept alive through all that shows you how committed to their faith and how committed they are to making sure that their people survive, right? Again, there's a story about Moses and the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years, right? It seems like they're always looking for their homeland or trying to get it back. That's why this is so important, because in 2 BC, they were able to take Jerusalem and they were able to rededicate their temple towards their faith and their practices. And this is where this comes from. So you understand why this would be celebrated. Yeah. Interesting stuff. All right. That's a very, very brief unemployable counselor guy trying to figure out a little bit about Hanukkah and what Hanukkah means and to understand a little better. If I'm sure there's people out there obviously know a lot more than I do. Throw it in the comments below. I'd love to hear more about this. I'm just looking at stuff online here about it tonight, just because, like I said, this is something that I'm interested in. And maybe this is something that we could do with some other ones too. Like Kwanzaa is another one where I'm like, I'd like to know more about that because right now I don't know anything. That one's relatively new. This one is old. It predates our view of Christianity right now by about 200 years, right? Even the Islamic texts predate Christianity by about 1,000 years, right? With the same similar stories of a carpenter and all those sorts of things. So, I mean, I do think that in the world there's a lot of crossover. I do think that just by reading up on this stuff, we're not so different, whether people want that or not. It's, I think, the truth. And I think that as we go more into this sort of thing in the world, the more we understand where people come from, I think the better it's going to be for us to work with them and get to know them and to see where they're coming from and hopefully their opinions. And then maybe a lot of the stuff that's been happening the last centuries might start to take a turn. Oh, yes, I'm an incredibly naive, unreplayable counselor, but I do think that if we don't do those things, then it's just not going to be. It's just not going to work. And then we're always going to be pointing at someone else in the dark because we disagree with their ideas because we're not even taking the time to try to understand where they come from. Right? You know, it's like I said, it's like when a parent dies or a grandparent dies, and you have the family arguing over their stuff, even though that's not what the wishes were, right? It becomes, oh, this land is here, I want it, or it's a highly piece of valuable land like the Gaza Strip, or right, we want this because, and it just turns into battles, and how many people need to pay that price? Like, there's a reason why people can't work together, right? These barriers don't just come up magically. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I didn't butcher the Jewish language. Hebrew, pretty sure I did. But please comment below. Let me know what you think. Tell me more about it. And, tell me the other side too, man. Like, this is just my reading up on Hanukkah and what that means and how long it lasts and its practices. But I'm willing to hear about others as well. Like I said, Kwanzaa and Ramadan. I think those ones are going to be next ones. But if you like this one, like I said, let me know. Comment, like, shares, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, wake the kids, and we'll learn about this stuff together. All right. Have a great night. Happy holidays. And happy Hanukkah to all of our Jewish subscribers, which might be one. I'm kind of hoping. If it is, let me know what you think. Okay? Take care. Happy Hanukkah, and be safe out there.